Hola community, welcome to Blender Today Live, episode 236. I think at this point we can start counting, or at least you can tell if the number of these episodes matches the version of Blender that you started with. I think for older people or like more veteran users, maybe 236 was a special one for me because it had a splash screen in 2004. This was released in Christmas 2004. Completely off topic, but hey, welcome to another episode of Blender Today Live, where we see what's new in Blender and the community and the Blender Studio, Blender everything. So we have some news last week. If you're subscribed to this channel, you may have gotten a notification about the live stream that we did from here, from downstairs, where I interview the team behind Wing It, the new latest open movie project by the Blender Studio. The movie is already available to watch. All the files are there. All the characters that from the movie, they're also ready for download. There are scenes that are ready for downloads, and you can even see in which scenes the characters are showcased. For example, the cat. Where is the cat? The cat is in these two files, mainly featured as a protagonist. So you can get this file and you can download it and you can see how it runs. You need a whole lot of RAM, but not a lot of hard drive or SSD, because they are very tiny, like less than 60 megabytes for this file. So fun to use. And again, if some of these files require a Blender Studio subscription, but remember that getting a Blender Studio subscription, it helps Blender development. The same way that you can subscribe to Blender Development Fund, there you can also contribute to Blender by getting a subscription at studio.blender.org/join, which doesn't look very exciting, but the excitement is once you are in. That being said, let's see. We are 10 days away. If you read the title of this live stream, 10 days away of 4.0 becoming beta, but also 4.1 becoming alpha already. Yes. So I think we're going to see a lot of changes in the coming week, and we have today over 500 commits to go through. Of course, I'm not going to go through all of them. I already did by myself this morning, since this morning, and you can see the full list on the thread on Blender community, but I will summarize it for you. We're going to go through one by one, sorted by date and by topic. Let's start with the letter A for animation. There's a whole bunch of changes in animation. Some of them are performance, some of them are related to the bone collection stuff that happened a few weeks ago already, and I already talked about. And let's start with the animation move snapping to scene. This makes so much sense. So the code for snapping was different between each of the editors, and in the snapping system was per editor and per editor, per editor and per type of animation editor. So now that has been moved into the scene to make more sense. Remember also the node editor used to have the settings per node, per editor. Well, and then they will move to the scene. Well, the same. And also some of these changes have some of the names of these snapping modes have been renamed from frame step to frame, second step to second, nearest frame to frame and absolute time snap, and second to second absolute time snap. And marker has stayed the same, nearest marker. And that's it. Actually, in the UI, it looks pretty similar. You can see in the animation editor now there is this popover. I can make the UI bigger for you and for me. There you go. And yes, it just looks very similar. I personally, I don't think we should have the modes word here because we don't have it anywhere else. We usually have the icon. There is no icon here. I think we could just get rid of it. But just to save some space here. And also doesn't introduce anything, because if it would show the name of the mode at least, but I think we can do without in this case. And it's so cool to see it now split into the different modes. So if you disable in one editor, it disables everywhere in both editors, not in just the one that you clicked on. Makes sense. Makes sense. The next change is also related to animation, and it has to do with optimizations. The graph editor wasn't very optimized at all. Like if you had a lot of points in a curve, when, for example, when you're sampling or baking, the name has changed. There's another change that I'm going to mention later, but if you had a bunch of points in one spot and you zoomed out, you can't really see the detail, but the detail was there, so that wasn't very performance friendly. So that has been cleaned up, and now it should be much faster. How much faster? Well, this is in microseconds, but I think it's better when you see it actually as part of the videos. There is one video here where it's showing the curve drawing in. No, there is another change actually that I think has a better let's see, a better example. This one, for example, this is an old video, but it shows more or less similar. It's similar kind of optimizations that were done. And in this one, we can see that on the left is the old 3.6 with sluggy. It's not the video that is slow. On the right, you can see 4.0. Nice. The other optimizations that were done in this area was handle drawings. So the handles of the curves points, similar to what was done before. Another optimization, but a UI change that is tiny, but it makes things so much more tidy. So on the top, it's the when you couldn't lock when you can't access certain settings in the graph editor, this icon would disappear. Like the lock icon, when you cannot lock it, it would disappear. And that made all the UI jump. Now it stays in line, it just doesn't show the icon if it doesn't make sense. So nice. If it can't show it. So I love these tiny additions. A new option was added, a new operator was added to the collection of slider operators that I've been showing in the previous shows as well. This one is called scale average, and that's what the name says. It scales both into an average of the, well, in this case, both curves into an average of the two of them. The next change, it has to do with renaming. So this will break add-ons or scripts that you have that use this setting. Of course, this is all mentioned in the release notes, so you don't have to do anything. Well, actually, 10 days from now, when 4.0 becomes beta, it's the moment where add-on developers are, or studio TDs are encouraged to check out the notes and start updating their scripts. So you are on time, you have them on time updated for when 4.0 comes out at the end of the month. The year, November, Jesus. Yes, November 7. Okay, so the renaming is Baked Curve. Baked Curve is now called Keys to Samples. And this was done, it's the same shortcut, same everything, but just the operator instead of bake is keys to samples, because bake is something else usually. The word sample, in this case the graph operator sample, now it's called bake keys. Sorry, after renaming the bake curve, the name of the sample also needed some renaming. Since baking is the term used in the animation to describe the action of creating dense data. And the same was done for the action editor, to the action operator. One small tweak was done to the drawing of the curves when they are locked. A few months ago, when this change was done, I even made a mention it here, but I was shocked that when there was a decision made to make the curves, when they were locked, they would be drawn, the vertices will drawn with an X. That was not how it wasn't very intuitive. It didn't show. It doesn't make much sense in the context of Blender. X is used for something else, and that was changed. Now the dots are simply gray. So yeah, gray. It's easier to. It's more clear. And I have now a full list of. I have a list of changes related to bone collection. So let me show you the list actually, just to see the amount of work that went into making the bone collections. I mean, continue making the bone collections system work. This was introduced a few weeks ago, but as you can see, for example, show the modifier toggle widget as inactive when there are no modifiers. Well, why not? This is a different one. Show F-curve modifier toggle widget as inactive when there are no modifiers. So in the animation editor, show the F-curve modifier if as inactive. So the above image shows first enabled but no modifiers present. Okay, so full color range. Modifiers are enabled and present. So I don't know, we don't use the gray color to represent that there's no data usually. It's when you can't access it. When it's yeah, well, when you can't access it. I'm not sure about this change. When modifiers are disabled, show the outline, and these are present, and these are it's too subtle of a change to I would rather I don't know. I wouldn't know a quick answer to this, but I don't think graying out is a way to go, right? Because the graying out language in Blender is when you can't, when it doesn't work, when it doesn't have access, when it's not available due to another feature, when it's not present, or when it's not active in some way. Anyway, topic changing. All the list of changes. This is what I was talking about before. Animation, for example, versioning. Create bone collections for empty bone groups. Remember the change of going from bone groups to bone collections? Well, all these changes have to do with that. Add bone collection custom property subpanel. Bone collections, show bone collections when the armature is pinned. Yeah, when you pin the armature, you should show that. Rename the show group colors to show bone colors, because now there are no longer groups there. The colors are per bone. That's one of the big changes. Remove RNA access, so Python access to bone groups. Then bone collections, well, add the bone collections property. You remove something, you add something. Add a clear RNA function to the collections. Disallow bone collections operations on linked armature. However, allow when they are overridden, if the armature is overridden. Allow appending bone collections with library overrides. That's amazing. Your armature can have its original bone collections, and then you can add bone collections on top. That it's like if you could add extra little squares to that old system, the 32 squares UI that Blender had back then. It's like if you could add more tiny squares. That's so cool. In a collection, in a armature that is linked, a character that is linked or something. So cool. Then you can rename bone collections added by overrides, but not the rest. You can assign bones to the collections that you created in the overrides. Then only show the editable bone collections when you are in the menu, in the M and Shift M menus to copy, linked, and copy. Move to collection. Remove bone collections from the outliner. Remove bone groups from the outliner, add bone collections to the outliner, merge bone collections assignment menus, and make it possible to select bone collections on a linked armature. In the list of changes that a small thing has. So it really shows that these small changes are not so small sometimes. Okay. Well, I don't know who thought that bone collections was a small change, but sometimes you get people from the community saying like, hey, can you add this small thing? Can you make this small thing? And it's really not that small sometimes. All right, time to change topics to the asset shelf. There's not much to see here, but it's the bone collection. Well, sorry, asset shelf. It's now closer to how the asset browser looks because the menus, the buttons in the header are more consistent. Basically, the display pop-up is more consistent. The order of the items is more consistent with the asset browser, and the same for the header. So search and display popover are in the same order as in the asset browser. But you only see this difference if you have used the asset shelf before. So A for attributes, the is required read-only property is now exposed in Python. So if you're making add-ons and you access these, you can now know if an attribute is or not required. For example, the ones that come built in Blender, like position, edge verts, corner edge, and so on. With C for Compositor, we have that now the Kuwahara filter considers the alpha channel. This makes it closer and more consistent with the GPU implementation. So yay for consistency. The next change has to do with curves. This one, operate on handles when the knot is selected. So this is a bug report actually. There was an issue that there was a report apparently that when you had the knot selected but not the handles, some operations wouldn't work. But in that case, now it will fall back to selecting or work on the handles of the knot that you have selected. Yay. 2 changes for the curve pen. Okay, so some of the features that I've gone through today, I didn't have time to go in detail, so some of them are gonna see them for the first time together. Like this one, curve pen tool, set the selection for extruded Bezier vertices. Extruded Bezier copied the selection from the previous point, which didn't always make sense. Makes sense, yeah. The handle pointing in the opposite direction from the extrusion couldn't be selected, for example. Now it is. Now a single handle is always selected. Ah, nice. So when you, yes, and this tool is used all the time by people using geometry nodes to build whatever, like roads and plants and trees and smoke puffs, like in the demo in geometry nodes in simulation. This one, the smoke puff, 2D puff. This file is available for free in the Blender website, and it uses this curve to draw, curve pen tool to draw smoke on a line. And the next change, similar to this, follow the convention now used for the 3D curve selection. So the same for 2D and 3D curves. Let's switch into C for cycles. Cycles has a bunch of refactors and tweaks, and this one is let's start with the user interface change. Add panels to the principal BSDF node. And this one I have to show you, and I cannot change to the shading workspace because it was crashing for some reason, or well, for the reason that it's alpha maybe. In the shader editor, look at how tiny the principal BLDF is now. So cool. Why? Because now there's panels, sub-panels. So yeah, you don't end up with a massive node anymore unless you want it. You can always want it, of course. You can always have, like, I want to see the coat and the sheen, even though I don't use them, I want to see them. And now you can show it and hide it. Specularity, also coat, sheen, animation. Some of the options here, they still need some cleanup. For example, subsurface, it's a bit redundant. It has a panel called subsurface, and every setting underneath says subsurface. Well, it could be like factor for this, and it could be like just scale here, radius, IR, index of refraction, and so on and so forth. So this needs still some work, but so far so good. Panels, yay. You can have, whenever you connect something to it and you collapse it, the node goes in the back. So it doesn't hide it, and it doesn't show a socket because it could be confusing if you have multiple. And then if you had a socket looking thing like here, you would want to connect things, so it's hidden under it. And brace yourself, there is a bug that has been reported already, but look at this note. Basically, there is a bug at the moment where if you collapse something, it can hide, or maybe this was fixed already. It can, maybe it was fixed. I checked this morning and it would keep the spacing between the panels in when it was collapsed. But yeah, yay for this. I love these changes. Collapsing. Nice and clean, exactly. By the way, I'm following the chat. I'm reading here. I have it on a secondary screen, but I'm trying to read whenever I can, not to get more too sidetracked. All right, so let's move on to more technical changes in cycles. There has been, okay, this one doesn't have a user-facing change, so it doesn't affect us yet. However, it is promising. GPU denoising refactor. Stefan committed this, where he moves the generic code from optics to GPU denoiser. So optics has a denoiser, has had a denoiser from always, based on optics, so NVIDIA optics. So it only works on NVIDIA graphics cards, and some of its code could be made more generic in order to be used by other parts of Blender. And this is what it was done because of the upcoming Open Image Denoise GPU support, which I am so looking forward, and I bet many of you are, because it just looks really good. Open Image Denoise, especially the last version, it does look very, very cool. The next change have to do with Principal BSDF 2.0. So many people, well, not many, maybe it's just the one person, but it's on every episode, where is the Principal BSDF 2.0? It's been here for a while. It's not a change that will just flip a switch and you have the new BSDF. It is a number of changes, and there has some updates in the last couple of weeks. However, the other day, YouTube, the algorithm, showed me an amazing channel that I want to share with you. If you don't see it yet, Christopher 3D. Go subscribe even without looking at him, because it has some of the best, even for someone that is related, like that it follows Blender development because of my job, has some of the best explanations of some of the changes in Blender, like AGX. If you don't know what AGX is and what it has to do with Filmic, it's so good, and it has so many different, like the problems with Filmic and where it excels and where it doesn't work, and AGX. And I just need you need to subscribe to this person so they can continue making these kind of videos. It's so good. Specular, the changes in the Principal BSDF 2.0 that I was mentioning. Let's go watch this video, render improvements. Then you can check the specularity change, the one AGX, that I don't know, everything. Every now and then you run into a YouTube channel and you see like, damn, this person knows, and it explains it very calm and everything. So I don't have to explain anything. I just sent you to Christopher. Thanks, Chris, for the work that you do. Well, let's talk about a bit some of the changes. I don't know how recent was that video, but these changes are from a few weeks ago. 5 days ago. So the next change, it's Principal BSDF clear code. Rework it. And this is a number of reworks that happened this week, in the last 2 weeks. Adds tint control. You can now tint your clear code, which simulates volumetric absorption inside the coding. This results in angle dependent saturation and affects all the underlying layers. such as diffuse, subsurface, metallic, and transmission. It provides a physically based alternative to ad hoc effects such as tinted specular highlights. Renames the component from clear coat to coat. It's no longer necessarily clear now. Yep, good point. Can't argue with that. This matches naming in other renderers or OpenPBR. OpenPBR, if you haven't heard about it, is a hot new topic in the industry to unify PBR into one description, like USD for PBR stuff. Adds an explicit code index of refraction in preparation for the future smarter index of refraction logic around the interaction between code and the main IOR. This used to be hard-coded to 1.5. Hard-coded, now we have options. Because panels allow you to hide those options if you don't need them. Remove the hard-coded 0.25 weight multiplier and adds versioning code to update existing files. OBJ import and export still applies the factor though. And also replaces the GTR1 microfacet with the regular GTX. More on this in the commit logs. Another part of the principal BSDF that was tweaked is now the subsurface parameters. One, for example, actually we just seen it, that subsurface, now the scale of the subsurface, it's now in distance instead of just a factor. But let's see. So previously, the principal BSDF used the subsurface input to scale the radius. When it was 0, it just used a diffuse closure. Otherwise, a subsurface closure. This sort of scaling input makes sense, but it should be specified in distance unit rather than a 0 to 1 factor. So this commit changes the unit and renames the input to subsurface scale. Additionally, it adds support for mixing diffuse and subsurface component, part of the OpenPBR spec. And the logic behind it is to support modeling. For example, dirt or paint on top of skin. Nice. Or paint. Before materials would either be fully diffuse or fully subsurface. Now in preparation to be able to mix these things. Material layers? Did I hear? Typical materials. For typical materials, this mixing factor will be either 0 or 1, just like metallic or transmissions. But supporting fractional inputs makes sense. For example, smooth transitions at boundaries. Another change is that there is no separate subsurface color anymore. Or this was mixed with the base color using the subsurface input as a factor. But this way was not really useful since that input was generally very small. And finally, the handling of how the path enters the material for random walk subsurface scattering is changed. Before, this was always using Lambertian, diffuse transmission, but it caused problems like overly white edges. Anyways, read all the definitions here, all the description here in the links. Emission, that was also changed in the principal BSDF. Emission used to be set to 1 and the color to 0. And that has changed. So we can actually just look at it now. So emission is now set to 0 and the color is set to 1 instead of black. Because that strength is set to 0. Next. It's a tiny optimization to only compute the code normal if needed. Speaking of optimizations, the new metal ray tracing, this is for macOS, and it's not even for everyone yet because macOS, it's only for macOS 14, so the next version of macOS that is not even out yet. This one has apparently the metal RT in that version of macOS has some ways of handling curves and ribbons that makes it more, well, makes it faster. So now Blender can take advantage of that, and it should see a speed up in when using a lot of curves and ribbons. For example, my file, my character Koro, the llama, now is 1.32 times faster, and the fishy cat that rendered with the cat is also now 1.39 times faster. Nice. Or 0.39 times faster. Fix geometry tangent output when using open shading language. Remove and use normal input on the HairBSDF. Ever tried to use the normal input in HairBSDF? It never worked, so it has been removed now, so yep. Use Blender headers to access geometry data. Avoid copy. That's an optimization by Hans. This one, he mentioned that he observed a 1.76x performance improvement to extract the mesh data to cycles. Apparently there was some duplicate copies and that it would use more memory and reduce performance because it was using some part of the API that it's not longer required. So it was doing too much work. How's the chat? There is one question. Does this mean Blender 4.0 will release in 10 days? Let me go full screen. If Blender 4.0 would release in 10 days, I wouldn't be showing new features for 4.0. That is something that you need to remind yourself every time, because we always have questions like this. And I think we need to make it more clear that the version that I'm showing now is 4.0. You can't be changing things 10 days before a release because it would be too close, right? Too soon. In fact, Blender 4.0 will release in November, and the moment where we cannot add any more new features, it's now in September, in 10 days. At the end of the month, you can't add new features to Blender 4.0. Every new feature will go to 4.1, and it would only be about fixing 4.0 until it comes out in November. Just a heads up, because we always get these kind of questions. Is like, is this for this version or the other version? And it's like, things take time. And once 4.0 goes in beta, it's up to the community to report as many issues as possible, as they find, not possible, but as they find, so we can get a stable release. Sorry that I took your question, but I usually we see this kind of question, and it's always good to find a moment, try to explain, because it's understandable. Development of open source is not very common, so people are confused as to which version we're talking about. Actually, it will be more clear now which version you're using when I mention about one change that is coming to the user interface. Let's move on. G. Okay, next. F for functions. Functions are functions that are very under the hood in Blender, and they're used mainly by geometry nodes, but can also be used by other parts of Blender. This one is an optimization that gives up to 20% this speed up in geometry nodes with a simple repeat zone by Jack Luke. Another optimization that reduces the amount of memory, and another one also to reduce the amount of memory and a 5% average speed up in a simple repeat zone setup. A lot of work was done also in the GPU department. You can see all the updates, all the changes in GPU, in the section called GPU. There is being like, well, fixes besides fixes, but so many. Grease Pencil 3.0 is also being worked on, but I'm not going to mention that. Let's jump into geometry node. There is a new input to skip the simulation in the output node of the simulation node. So simulation zone. Now you can skip that. So it's like a pass through, but it's not a pass through because it still gets calculated. Just skip it. Skip that step. It's a boolean, but you can read more about it in there. Expose sharp edge status with built-in nodes. What is it? Well, this changes the existing isShadeSmooth node to be named isFaceSmooth and a new isEdgeSmooth node. So instead of having one node that is just checks if something is smooth, there will be, if you go inside, you will see that there is two new nodes checking if the edge smooth and the face smooth, it will give you if it's smooth. Basically, this is under the hood, or under the node group kind of hood. So yeah, pretty simple. Oh, this one controversial. 2 weeks ago, the add modifier menu was updated, was changed. So the add modifier menu now has this more familiar looking, as in Shift A nodes or Shift A meshes or objects, similar concept. So the add modifier menu now allows you, well, first it shows everything in a menu style, and also allows you to search. So you can search if you want to search when you want to add a mirror, for example, or let's say a mirror and a soft surf. Shift A to add, because you can also use Shift A with the mouse over the properties section here. You don't have to click on the button. Shift A and start typing mirror, enter, boom. Now I have a mirror. I want to have a subsurf. All right, subdivision. Shift A, subdivision, bam, and now I have it. So fast, so quick. And not only that, but you also get more modifiers here. Every node group, geometry nodes node group that is marked as a modifier, which are by default, they will show up here now in its own menu. So you can actually search for your own assets. You can build your own assets, and Blender will now find them. So if I want to add freeze hair and I have that in my asset library, I can just Shift A, freeze, bam, now I have it. Isn't that nice? So there were some concerns because in the past, and let's go back to Blender 2.7 because it hasn't changed since forever, we had this wall of options. And this is not really sustainable because you can't add new items very easily with Blender's code. You can't search very easily either. And you could type some keys to access some of the options, like K for mask, but mirror, which is one of the most used items, you couldn't access with a key like M for mirror. You couldn't. So it only makes sense to use that, to use a new menu that is more extendable. Second, the organization of this, like edit, generate, deform, mesh, and physics, I think it could use a better organization. This is a second step that should be done eventually. Maybe group all the smooth stuff into its own submenu, for example. This still has to be decided, but so far it is so much faster if you just add mirror and surf. Look, it was so quick. Anyway, I'm a big fan of this, especially of Shift A. Shift A is the best. And of course you have geometry nodes as the first item on the list because it doesn't fit any category. It can be anything. It can be edit, physics, generate, deform, so on. All right. Next, so related to that, there is a few changes. So when you add a modifier and an asset modifier, there will be no selector for the, so when I add a new modifier, this is the selector of the group. But when you add an asset modifier like this, it doesn't show the selector because most of the time you're not gonna really need it. Instead, if you want to change the node group by whatever reason, you can click on show node group and then you can change it, but you can also just hide it. So it's a bit more out of the way when you don't need it. If you duplicate though, so if this is hidden and then I duplicate it, then in this case it's not going to show it, even though I thought it would show it because there is a commit here. Show node group in modifier UI after duplication. Interesting. Or maybe after. Okay, maybe I just understood it wrong. The next change. Oops, where am I? Here. It's just change between settings. Between desktops. Tools. Well, this is a work in progress. Actually, tools are node tools are an experimental setting in Blender 4.0 that you can access from the preferences experimental node group operators. This setting will go away within 10 days because it will be part of Blender 4.0. I just confirmed with the developers, and it will be there. It's just you have to enable it for the time being. But once you have that, now there are some improvements done to make it a bit more friendly. For example, when you create a new tool, the default settings are going to be set for you in a way that it makes sense. For example, the mode of the tool will be taken from the active mode that you're working on, and the new node group is going to be called tool, just because it's a node group, but it will be named for you, so it makes more sense and you can find it more easily. Also, when you redo this operation, or like when you run it for the first time, you're gonna see the name of the tool in the as the title of the panel. And there's no picture here, but I bet it looks great. Basically, you make a tool and then you run it, and it's gonna be accessible. You're gonna see the name in the panel. Then this gonna skip the redo panel for node tools without inputs. Makes sense. Why would you redo? Yeah, makes sense. Skip redo panels for node tools without inputs. More usability changes. Show and categorize assets in a separate menu. Alright, so when there is assets that do not have any menu, it used to hide them completely, and now it shows a menu entry called no catalog. I don't know, and an entry called no catalog. That no, it's like there's nothing wrong with. I don't like the word no in the UI. Like no, I think the naming should match what is used here, unless they also changed it in the asset browser. No, the asset browser is called an assign, so I think it should be either no catalog or unassign, or uncategorized, and uncategorized also here, like something that makes a connection, because what you find here, it's what's gonna show in the UI. I don't know. I shouldn't be giving notes in the middle of a live stream. Then, oh, remember that a few weeks ago when I showed this, I had to close Blender and start again. That's no longer needed. Now the node tool menus are gonna update dynamically without you having to close Blender and open it again. Send lazy threading hint from icosphere node. Allows for better multi-threading because work can be moved to other threads while waiting for the icosphere to be generated. Fast icospheres. These changes, I think they're more like under the hood. What is it? I know. Create local tree logger only when something is logged. Brings the speed up of the modifier evaluation from 24 milliseconds to 14 milliseconds. Nice. Generalize zone body function generation. Use separate struct for side effects. Okay, this doesn't have to any, and more under the hood stuff. Refactoring. In terms of internationalization, there has been a lot of updates, and one that is huge that I'm not going to share here, but if you're in the translations, Blender translations universe, you might have heard of. Not going to mention yet. I'm going to do a big reveal maybe next time, when things are more ready. Still work in progress. Switching to K for Keymap, one small change. You can now press return in the numpad to create a new line when editing a text object in edit mode. Nice. In library overrides, the needs resync status of libraries has been exposed to Python, so you can You can let your TD, and you can let your users know when something needs a resync. For the M for macOS, huge change by the community and Francesco and Brecht. There is a new icon for, well, where is the icon? Where can I see the icon? Oh, anyway, this is the new icon for macOS. Yay! Dark background for dark times. Now, to make this orange stand out. But yeah, in the future it would be nice to have two icons but in all platforms, one for alpha and one for regular Blender. It would be nice the same way that we have two splash screens, one for the alpha and one for beta and so on, and release. That would be cool. Which color should it be? Maybe it should be blue, like in the one in the development versions. Kind of illegal, but maybe it makes sense because it's development related Blender. The next change has to do with mesh, further optimized topology map creation by Hans Goody. So this change, oh wow, 1.72, 1.5x times, yeah. So this change increases performance or reduces time and optimization that brings 1.63 and 1.5, around 1.5, 1.7 optimization, X optimization on building an array in mesh stuff. This other one, pre-fill loose verts, saves about 30 milliseconds of work every frame, where a 10 million vertex line is rebuilt from scratch. From M, no, we stay in M for modifier. So 2 weeks ago, the menu of empty modifier, the menu for add a new modifier empty, has been renamed to geometry nodes. Actually, 2 weeks ago, this menu wasn't even there, so probably you missed it. But here it is. N for nodes. Fix versioning 2.6 groups. Blender 2.6. Yep. So if you have Blender version 2.6, you have blend files that old, they're not gonna crash anymore. You can now add shortcuts for adding specific node groups asset from the menu. Awesome. I didn't know. It supports quick favorites and shortcuts for specific node. So if I have my favorite asset, like let's try it. I didn't know, actually I missed this one. I want to add a set haircut profile, which is a node group, an asset. I can add it to quick favorites and a shortcut. Nice. And the quick favorites are per editor, so actually this one will be available in the nice, in both. Pressing Q in the modifier area and in the area in the 3D viewport, even when I'm in render mode. Nice. Cool. The next change, it's draw node buttons between the outputs and the inputs for custom layouts. This is mainly just a visual change, showing the node group options between these two, just like it's in other nodes, so more consistent. In Python API, wait, no. Well, actually, yes, because the change that I'm about to show, it's inline nodes, but this one in inline sockets, but these are not used yet, as far as I know. We just had a meeting today about this, so maybe I'll save it for next week. In Python, two changes. One, postpone loading the add-ons until after the keymaps have been defined. This could lead to some, like when in Blender has its own keymaps, but also add-ons have their own keymaps. So there was a fight there, and there could be issues. We had issues with that in the past that has been fixed. And there's a new operator to clear the keymaps in Python API. S for snapping. You can now, snapping now supports occlusion of in-front objects. It's a fix, but also a feature. in front objects remain visible even if they are behind other in front objects or another in front object. So now this should work well with snapping. In the text editor, oh cool, I love this. So if you use a text editor in Blender, send an emoji of the writing emoji, because the text editor in Blender now has an auto close. Well, it's been a while that it has this auto close preference, but now if you have selected some part of the text, and let's see if it even works. So let's see, let's go into some text. So if I select some of this and then I press quotes or brackets, no, I don't have it turned on. Let's see, editor, text rendering, no, editing, text editor, auto close character pairs. It should be on by default. I select this and press yes, and if you press like quotes, or if you press like brackets, or that should be put into brackets or code, or nice, awesome, nice. Love the emojis. Yes, I also use the text editor in Blender. It's the best way to edit the UI, the Blender UI. Anyways, auto close pairs. Do you think, you users, do you think that the option to auto close pairs should be on by default or not? And that's it. And there were some improvements to it. Restore the selection if auto closing fails. Simplify the selection, and some internal changes. T for texture nodes. Refactor the add menu. This doesn't have big changes in terms of UI, but it will expand into, well, no, it won't expand. Texture nodes are end of life, but might as well update the menu while I was at it. In the next change, thumbnails. Always use cache thumbnails for offline files. Nice. Always use the cache thumbnails for performance. U for user interface. So, add modifier shortcut. I already mentioned this one. Add canvas picker to paint modes in the 3D viewport. Wow, I haven't shared this one before. Well, so this is the future. Feature and the future, because it's coming in the next version of Blender. Have you ever run into the, for example, working full screen and you want to texture vertex paint, right? And you start vertex painting and you want to change the vertex paint or add a new one. Well, you had to go into the properties tab, so you couldn't work in full screen. Now, in the header, in the center of the header, you can add new anything. So new groups, and start drawing and changing from here right away. The same concept applies to weight painting. So if you're painting, you have a new weight paint, and you can create a new group or all the groups that you want, and you can change from them here. So you can paint and change. And now I run into this issue. I thought I had to update my system. This has nothing to do with the version, but I single click and it thinks that I'm pressing control. There's something wrong with my computer here. So, which is a pity that I land into this. Yes, I think it has the control stuck, because if I just scroll it starts changing the zoom. So yeah. Anyways, the same concept for the texture painting, so you can change the active and active everything. Active. Did it get stuck? No. Now it works. Cool. If I'm in any mode, if I'm in texture paint, I can change the active material, active, for example, if I'm in base color, and then I'm in specular, I can change directly from here as I'm drawing. Nice. It's basically having a bit more usability, and also it follows the same concept as in the image editor, for example, that you have this concept of the source in the center of the editor, the same concept here. And that applies to vertex paint, weight paint, texture paint, and in sculpting mode, you don't have this unless you are in the paint modes, and then you can change it. Okay. The next change Forma Vision VFX. What version of Blender is that? 4.0. Yes, I'm using Blender 4.0. That is the latest version. If you have any questions which version it is, you can, at the bottom right, you can see the version of Blender. But maybe I was covering with my ugly face, sorry. Next. New window, the operator for new window now can be used while in maximized area. So yeah, why not? Actually, this was a right-click select feature request. It used to be grayed out when you are in full screen, but there is no really reason. And this post from 2 weeks ago was found by Harley, and he made this nice post, nice comment. Thank you. A new, very tiny change for themes. So in themes, when editing the color of a widget, for example, if you want it to be fully transparent, you could never make it fully transparent and have a shadow at the same time, and have no shadows at the same time, like the emboss. So now you can. Now the transparency, or like the embossing, will only show up if the color is non-transparent or it has a no outline. So now you can have this kind of fully transparent widgets, which is nice. It's a small, very small change, but I like it. It allows us to have this UI more clean, more minimal. A lot of changes and fixes and improvements were done to the selected enums feature. Thanks. You can now search in menus. I already mentioned this when I was showing the feature of the modifier, but now you can also do it in anywhere where you have an add menu, like Shift A, monkey, bam. You can simply press start typing. So if you want to add a force field like wind, you can just search for wind, and Shift A, I don't know, grease pencil. And you can see which ones you want. It's so nice. It's fast, efficient, and extendable. So if you have for example, if you have a bunch of add-ons that have all the extra add-ons, all the extra mesh, extra curve, now you can actually search for these things. Single vert, pipe gears, pipe joints, extras. Like I want to end a cross joint, for example. Now you don't have to go down this menu or remember which keys it was. Now you can just like joint, and then there you go. Let's see, cross there, bam. Look at my beautiful cross joint entry. Yay, search. It also applies to, well, probably the one that many people are going to use. It's the node editor, because you can now search. Yeah, my computer got stuck again. Why would you do this, computer? And I don't know what to blame. The operating system, my computer, my keys, I don't know. Anyways, I can't show you, but inside of in Blender now you can. Okay, now it works. In geometry nodes or in the node editor, shading, whatever, you can now simply search in here for whatever node you want. Instead of clicking on search or adding a shortcut to search, now you can just simply start typing right away. Confirmation dialogues were not highlighted properly. Now they are. Selected tool items also were not highlighted properly. Now they are. You can actually see which tool is active and then which one you are hover on. remember that the status bar at some point when it would show like a report, it would flash of a one color? That was actually removed by mistake many years ago, 3 years ago, and it's now back. So yay, flashing. So when you copy an object or like any of this, so for example, let's see if I can copy an object. Yeah, now it's very subtle, but it flashes. We can make it more flashy. Then some changes in the modifiers to remove duplicates. The mark asset or everything related to assets now have an icon in the, for example, when you right click in the outliner, mark asset, you're going to see the asset icon to make a connection there. I don't know how we didn't see this one before, because it really makes sense. Right click, mark asset, because it is great for people using other languages or learning from tutorials. It makes a connection to it. So very nice addition. Thanks. Would thank himself. Oh yeah, thanks. I couldn't live without this. I think we should do the same for library overrides. What do you think? Because library overrides also have a particular icon that we could use. So we could use the icon here to library override. Also, I noticed that, I noticed that we have a setting that is twice: object library override make and relations make library override. I think it's there the same. I need to ask Bastian, and we need to remove one, probably the one in here in relations, and then add the icon here. So it would. I thought I had a patch for this weekend. I think I made a patch. Open recent is now in the F4 menu. When you open Blender, F4, my favorite menu. Open recent was missing from there, so now has been added. And this one is a community contribution by dshot92. Thank you, dshot. In the nodes, the active node, the panel, would have an entry called name, but to edit the name of an item in the UI list. But in Blender, everywhere in Blender, we don't have that actually. And it's something that you have to learn, like when you use Blender, like when you want to change the name of something, just double click and change it, right? And that's something that, like, we don't expose a name item everywhere, which is a bit hidden, but you only learn it once. So yeah, this has been removed where it wasn't needed. You know what's needed? Someone like Leon to be looking at inconsistencies, tiny inconsistencies in the Blender UI. The bottom of the menus had this padding that didn't match. It was a bit too long. Not anymore. Now these menus are beautiful, pixel perfect. Next. The asset shelf. Now when you resize the header of the asset shelf, it's going to resize the entire header, because before you could hide only the header and then the rest of the asset shelf. So if I see the asset shelf, this. Now you can resize the entire shelf from the header instead of just the bottom. Small little usability change improvement. Some panels in some languages that had a lot of words, they were being cut off. Now not anymore. So some languages have many characters, and there was a limit to the name of the panels that has been removed. Now it's going to be dynamic. You can have as long names as you want in your panels. Another tiny change is that for some entries in these menus, they had an icon that would kind of make it look like you could select multiple options, but no, like it had a checkbox, like you could have multiple, but it's not a multiple choice. It's a radio button, basically. You can only choose one. So now they use the actual icon to make it so you can tell that you only use one at a time. Thank you, Thomas. Barlow for working on this, Mr. M. In the file browser, the bookmarks are gonna show up first in the sidebar, the bookmark in the sidebar, because bookmarks are the one thing that you actually control yourself, that you can actually, you know, make your own bookmarks and save them, and they're stored on your preferences. So they're gonna be show up first, and then system, and then volumes. That's one of the changes, and then recent. Another usability improvement. I have never noticed that I don't have an older Blender, or maybe I do. Have you ever noticed that in the menu for changing modes, there was in the pie menu, there was like a dead zone. You could select object, sculpt, and then in the middle, you couldn't select anything. There was like an empty area. Like, where is that? Well, that has been removed. Now in Blender 4.0, I love these usability changes. Now in Blender 4.0, the change of modes, like the pie menus, if there is no items, it would always be like either one or the other. There's no dead zones. So nice. Less chances of failing and going nowhere. Let's see. Allow transparency when editing text in widgets. Yeah, it could happen that well, now basically you with this change, you can now specify the item color, or for example the color that when you edit the color of your items in the list, to be transparent, alpha. So that means that it will blend better with the background, no longer a hard-coded dark or a fully opaque color. So it's to add flexibility to theming. And also I actually used it myself to fix an issue in the theme. There is custom tooltip. So the following change doesn't have any use case yet implemented, but look at this. It allows for tooltips that are no longer limited to one color and that's it. Now Blender can have custom colors and custom images inside of tooltips. Awesome. It's huge. It's not used anywhere yet, as far as I know. There is a patch maybe to using it in the file browser, but this is huge. Like the moment we start using this more and more, so happy. Thank you, Harley. And speaking of Harley, Blender, now when you use Blender, you will find it that, let me show you. In the past, Blender, well, in the past, in 3.6, Blender, the header of the window would always say just Blender, right? No version, no nothing. Of course, if you have a file open, it would show something, but it wouldn't even 2.7 didn't even tell you that there was some changes in the file. Anyways, now Blender, when you open Blender, it shows you that the file is unsaved and that you're using Blender 4.0 alpha. So the patch makes it that you can see the version of Blender in the title. You can see if it's alpha, beta, release candidate. If it's a release, you're not gonna see that. And when you open a file, the name of the file is shown first. So at a glance, you can see like, this is untitled, and then the path. So there were many versions about this. There was one that before Blender 3.6, Blender will show the full path, but that would mean that in some operating systems, the path will get shortened because it doesn't fit. It didn't fit in the screen. And that would lead to, you don't know which file you're working on. So, but also the Blender version Blender name was before, at the beginning. So you had a bunch of Blender open, and you didn't know which file you're working on. So now Blender will show first the name of the file, then the path, then Blender, and then the version that you're working on. all the information in the world. Cool. And I don't know if you can see that in the screen. Yeah, you can see Unsave Blender 4.0. So you can see it here and in the header of the window. Great. What else? Add icons to color ramp context menu items. This is a tiny thing that I did on the weekend. That let's just add some icons to this, so you can see the flip color. The reset color ramp is using the same color as the reset to default value, just so it's more familiar. And there is some separators added. Next, today I renamed Eevee. What? Yes. Eevee, there was some ambiguity. Some parts of Blender will call Eevee lowercase and some uppercase, and this just unifies it. And Blender, Eevee, it's always all uppercase. So if you see someone making a tutorial and using the name Eevee in lowercase, you can tell them, hey, someone from the Blender YouTube channel told us that Eevee is all uppercase because it's an acronym actually. It stands for Extremely Efficient Viewport Experience Engine. Now you know. Next, in the letter U for UV, restore internal. Well, actually, these are just bug fixes. I don't know why. Let's just mention them. Restore internal solver state variable. This is just to fix some bugs. Disable best fit rotation of all islands at the end of UV packing. It fixes an issue where the UV unwrap packs the island diagonally instead of straight. And last, also related to packing, when finding the best packing tool, use the area as a tiebreaker. So this will fix issues when Smart UV project will unnecessarily rotate islands. So yay for UV fixes. Thank you, Brecht. And Vulkan also saw a lot of updates, and the Workbench, this is the last thing I have to talk about today, and I'm really running out of time because reasons. Workbench, it's gone. Yes, the Workbench, the old Workbench has been removed. So Workbench next is now what is being used. So long, Workbench. It's been good. I mean, you're not gonna see any difference. You shouldn't see any difference. If you see, please report it, but you shouldn't see any difference. Maybe a bit better performance, but that's about it. All right, I think I'm officially without a voice now. All right. Let's see. Do we have time for questions? Let's see if maybe I can do 5. What time is it? 1 hour 18 minutes. Okay, let's see if I can do 5 questions. There is 14 comments. Sorry for I'm not gonna be able to answer them all, but let's see if there is anything with upvotes. Nothing with upvotes, so I can go to the bottom and read the ones that were posted first. But hello, how are you? Hi Pablo, great job on the pet projects. Hey, I didn't work on, well, we all work on pet projects. Everybody that is here at this building works in one way or another with pet projects, on pet projects. Also known as Wing It. Both of you and the rest of the team still have no clue how you managed some of that animation and even got to play with some files. Nice. I've got to say, with the whole Unity debacle, oh yeah, Unity, I wouldn't like to be there. It's indirectly affected me and my lead developer. People are taking a new look at open source and all throughout the community, and that means Blender. We're getting a whole lot of new comments from various places, and it seems animation and rigging tools are definitely the highest priority, followed directly by texture baking and painting. We really gotta move away from the current texture nodes and UV editor bake system. Agree. If you could simply have a bone envelope editor. Think of a capsule with an outer layer of fall off. Ooh. A selection for default rigging envelopes shapes, like capsule nearest for limbs, but adjustments. It would be great. Let's get some non-destructive rigging systems. Yeah, but that's coming. Rigging nodes, that is coming. We've seen a lot of adjustments for curves, but things like newer bone envelope techniques, dedicated muscle deformance, wrinkle maps, and soft body that respects internal points. So many solvers to update, yes. But yeah, rigging nodes, it's a thing, it's coming. Next question. Hey Pablo, excited about 4.0? Me too, although I have to start working on the release notes at some point. Gee. I would like to ask, are there any plans to improve the weight painting mode? For example, being able to switch what armature I'm working on by clicking similar shortcuts like Alt-Q in sculpt mode, or the draw brushes being a separate button. The draw brushes being a separate buttons. Yeah, I think that part, it would be more like, thing is, weight painting mode, all you're doing, it's painting on an attribute, right? Vertex paint, you're painting in a color attribute. So they could be kind of packed together into like an attribute painting mode. Once that gets improved, I bet it would ripple into other modes. But yeah, absolutely. Although what you say about switching armatures, isn't that already in? So if I have an armature here, right? Beautiful armature, and then I have another beautiful armature. If I am in pose mode, I can change to the other object by just clicking in the outliner. So yeah, it is possible. Yeah, you can this way with the outliner. You can't do it from here though. You can select multiple objects. You can select both objects, 1, 2, and then enter into pose mode, or simply also in edit mode should be possible. Yeah, you can. So use the outliner mode switching. Thank you, Marek. Next, let's 3 more questions. Clan Art says, hello Pablo, I hope you're having a good day. I am, thank you. I'm happy to be back in the live streams. BlenderToday. I hope you're excited for Beacon. I am also excited about that. And if you haven't, I can't say anything, but if you haven't gotten your ticket yet, I would hurry up. Just saying. I hope you're excited for Beacon. Is there anything in particular you're looking forward to? Or what is your favorite part? My favorite part about Blender Conference is, well, being there, hanging out with people. I'm not extremely I don't really go that much to the presentations because unless they're like, I don't know, because they're all on YouTube anyway, and the more you are at the presentations, the less time you have to hang out with other people. And I kind of like that part of Blender Conference the most, being able to just hang out with the people, being there and just ask like how they're doing or what are they doing, and they show you their work and seeing familiar faces. I have been to Blender Conference since 2008, so that's a lot of conferences, and you always see familiar faces. Next, I hear rumors that there is going to be a Beacon West, Beacon LA. Is there anything information you can share on that? Being from North America, I'm extremely excited for a conference close to home. There is no rumors because it's a fact. If you go to beaconla.org, you're gonna be redirected to the CG Cookie website that gives you the full-on details of the next Blender conference. The first official Blender conference outside of Amsterdam in Los Angeles, California, United States of North America. The details you can find there. You can sign up. You can the dates are already set, 19th and 20th of April 420. Yep, 2024. So I think I'm gonna leave a comment. No, if I leave a comment, the whole website, I'm gonna gonna update. So I hope you can. I'm gonna share the link in the chat. beaconla.org. And next question. Hello, Pablo. Panel B in BSDF looks good, but fonts look similar in header and in sockets. It would be nice if it stood out somehow, like uppercase. Yeah, uppercase or bold. Or the problem with uppercase is that once you have some text uppercase, then the other text doesn't make sense. Like BSDF, it's an acronym, right? So it makes sense to have it uppercase. If you have everything uppercase, then BSDF no longer, yeah, an acronym. Anyway, yeah, maybe we can play with bold, italics, colors, hover effects. And the last question, HiveMind says, nice show, Pablo. I always enjoy them. Thank you. Me too. I was wondering if Node Wrangler actions will be more integrated into Blender 4.0. All tutorials begin with enabling it, so newcomers may not have a smooth initial experience. It's challenging to grab a little dot, and it often results in stretching the node. Also, if I have another question, do you know if Andy Goralczyk and Simon Thomas have released the audiovisual show blend file from Beacon 2022? No, I don't think they have, and probably no longer works with Blender 4, because that was done in a year ago, which in Blender years that is like forever. It's like ancient. And also that was, I remember that was using the compositor, the real-time compositor, which was added like the same week or so. So I don't think so. The other question related to Node Wrangler, you know, the problem with Node Wrangler is that we all want to incorporate these settings, right? The thing is, it does too many things. So one big problem is that in the Node Wrangler, you can Control-Shift-Click to make to connect the output to the node, right? But it does it via a hack. It makes an emission shader under the hood, and it makes an emission shader. Blender cycles Eevee, they should have their own output. So that's why it's no longer, but that's why it's not added to Blender itself internally. That's a pity, but yeah. I mean, we could implement all the other things. Like I also love the Control-Shift-Click, Control-Right-Click, Control-Shift, Control-Alt. I think we should add those. But for example, Node Wrangler also has a ton of hotkeys that it introduces, that this might get on the way with things that Blender does internally. Yeah, that Blender should have its own. So if anybody here in the community, and this was the last question actually, so I'm gonna go full screen. I think everybody in the team, in the node, like in the geometry nodes and the node editor modules and the UI module, we all want Node Wrangler to be built-in part of Blender. But the thing is, if we just enable the add-on to be enabled by default to everyone, we would be introducing some inconsistencies with the rest of Blender, and also some hacks like the ones that I show you. So the best way, and this is an open call to everybody that wants to maybe help in this, is to split Node Wrangler into smaller bits, and like just take some bits and add it to the Blender built-in operators. Just one operator, like the swap node. That should be, that's a setting as an operator in the Node Wrangler. Or we could just like take it out, put it in Blender. Make a pull request, tiny, like this big, just that. Cool. Next, the connections, the Control-Shift-Clicking, the Control-Alt-Clicking, the Control, all this in one patch, and then slowly and steadily take some of those operators into Blender, and then at some point Node Wrangler is no longer being, like maybe Node Wrangler ends up being only for these advanced shortcuts or for the shader emission hack, until Blender gets its own, cycles Eevee get their own. Wouldn't that be great? So maybe that would be a good approach. to have that. All right, that's it. Where are folks finding the most recent? Ah, yeah. Okay, sorry. Yeah, one last call to, not call, public service announcement. Daily builds. What is happening? Linux, you have the latest and greatest. macOS, you have the latest and greatest, starting a few days ago actually, because this was also broken. However, Windows, it's stuck on September 11. Why? Because Windows builds, they use a specific certificate provided by Microsoft. The Blender Foundation has to apply for that certificate. So when you sign the builds with that certificate, Windows doesn't freak out and doesn't think that it's a virus and all that. Blender Foundation has to apply for that certificate. It takes days, and then it has to put it in the system and sign all those builds with that. That's why it takes time. Usually this is done ahead of time, so you don't see it. But for some reason, the certificate expired way before expected the deadline, even a few weeks or months even before time. So macOS, the people at Apple are faster, so that's why you don't, like, they are back in action. Linux, you don't need it. On Windows, actually Windows, if you compile your own, maybe this is a good time to just, compile your own Blender. Go to developer.blender.org and gonna find the first step is to build Blender. And then you can see, oh, I'm on Windows, cool. And then you can just read this documentation. It's not really that long. And you compile your own Blender, and you never have to download 300 megs of 200, 300 megs of each time you want to update Blender. You only have to learn how to compile once, and then you just download a few kilobytes of text files every now and then, run make, get a coffee, and you have your own Blender compiled on your own system with your own settings. Open source at its finest. So yeah. Other than that, I think I will call it a day. What about we see each other next week? Yes, because it's gonna be full of news this week, and today I already went way over time because of have so many features that were added in the last 2 weeks, and I have a feeling that next week is also gonna be busy. So let's meet again next week, same place, same time, for another episode of Blender Today Live. Watch your ear holes, because this time I don't know how loud was that. I hope it wasn't too loud. Hey, it's not fair. I'm not listening. I miss this. Have a fantastic week. Download Blender or learn how to compile it. The Billboard will be back online soon for Windows. Or install Linux. This is a fantastic time to install Linux. It's much easier than ever, and you can dual boot your Windows and Linux, and you're gonna have the latest Blender. Isn't that great? And now there will be conspiracies that saying that Blender Foundation stopped the Windows builds just so more people use Linux. I wish more people use Linux, because then hardware makers, manufacturers would provide support. It's not. I'm not gonna rant anymore. See you. Have a fantastic week. Happy blending. Till next week. Bye.